Perfect. Thank you, Joe. So hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, thank you, Joe, for inviting us. So just a little short introduction. My name is Octavia, and alongside my classmates, Sophia, Jacob, Aamina, and Philip, we're all final year undergrad students at King's College London. And we were lucky enough to take Gillian's module this past academic year. So as you already very nicely explained, it was entitled Influencing Consumers, and this whole module explored how applied psychological theory can be implemented in the digital marketing world. So actually, it was thanks to Gillian's collaboration with Guerrilla Shop Builder, we were able to put this academic theory that we learned in the module into real life practice. So through the shop builder itself, we were able to achieve these real life exciting results. So through this presentation, we wish to share just a little bit of an insight into the brief we were given by Gillian, as we saw previously, and the different routes that we as a group decided to take, and how our own experiment ended up going. So we'd like to round off our presentation at the end by finally reflecting on our own little journey and explore the valuable takeaways we've had from this fascinating opportunity. So without further ado, I'd like to start off by handing over to Sophia, who's going to go through the brief and kind of give a little bit of a background and a little bit more info about the project itself.
Thank you, Octavia. So as Gillian already briefly explained, but now we're kind of giving you our perspective as the students doing the actual assignment. So initially, as the group assignment for Gillian's class, Influencing Consumers, we were initially presented with a virtual shop which contained 30 products, all priced between 50 and 100 pounds. So our task, as Gillian explained, was to select one of these products and alter the shop in a way that would nudge participants towards purchasing it as a birthday present for the fictitious character Sophie, which you can see her description in the bottom right corner. So our altered shop would then be sent out to participants, and in the end, as we will go further into, it would be benchmarked against a control shop where no interventions had been applied. So these interventions were applied both to the shop itself and to the path that participants took. As you will see later, my colleagues will explain it better. So actually, the true aim of this assignment was not just to play around the shop, although that was very fun. It was to apply the psychological theories that we had learned in class, and not just in Gillian's class, but also, we applied so many other things that we learned in different subjects in an industry relevant manner and with real consumers at stake. So this was really the most interesting part of the assignment. It was so different from the traditional formats that we had experienced in other classes and before at King's. So this really differentiated the module from others. And it was really interesting to then compare the effectiveness of the nudges to an actual control shop. So it really gave us a real life insight into how these theories are actually applied. So, okay, without further ado, let's see how we actually approached it, because I think without actually seeing what we did, it's hard to understand.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sophia. So we approached the task in a very strategic manner. We were implement as many nudges as possible, which ultimately led us to select the Miss Dior perfume, as Gillian already mentioned. So our assumption was that the product's high consumer awareness would allow us to tap into already established associative networks. So in other words, we assumed that a majority of our participants were already familiar with the Miss Dior perfume and had already learned to associate the product with, for example, vibrant colors, floral scents, or even with the campaign's face, Natalie Portman. And our hunch was that by subconsciously activating these associative networks, we'd be able to nudge participants towards making a purchase of our product. So following this train of thought, we distributed such nudges throughout 3 sequential steps in our experiment, namely a blog, a social media task, and a virtual shop. So let's consider each in turn and walk through the sort of things that our participants were exposed to throughout the experiment. So let's start off with the blog. The main aim of the blog was to prime participants in favor of our product. we really felt that this format would not only allow us to insert persuasion tactics in a very native manner, but it would also enable us to connect in an authentic way with our participants. So it was a great way to start the experiment and connect with the people behind the screen. And in our blog, we chose to speak through the voice of a fictional influencer by the name of Regina George, who talks to her followers about her own 21st birthday and ranks her 3 favorite gifts. And the reasoning behind this was that by using an opinion leader, we'd be able to make use of Cialdini's weapons of influence, and mainly authority, social proof, and liking. For example, if we think about authority, the influencer's following allows her to benefit from a sort of social status in the eyes of the participant, which makes them more likely to accept her directions. And in a similar way, given that Regina's age and gender align with Sophie's, Regina is likely to act as social proof, which makes her positive approval of certain gifts all the more valuable. So in a way, she almost testifies to the validity of certain gifts. And arguably, our influencer's name, which is a reference to the popular movie Mean Girls, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the 2000s movie, but also her very colloquial and engaging tone makes her very likable to participants. So, which also, according to Cialdini, stimulates further compliance. So as you may have noticed, Regina had great persuasive power. So given this power, it was all the more important that we select the right products. So in other words, products that would prime participants in favor of our product, of the Miss Dior perfume, and narrow their consideration sets down to beauty items. But obviously there was always the potential for persuasion resistance. So we had to be really careful not to display items that are too directly associated with the perfume. So in the end, we settled on a scented wave spray, a floral print scarf, and a Chanel lipstick, which you can see on the screen. Just for a little bit of context, for example, the scented wave spray we selected to activate participants' receptiveness towards scented items or perfumed items, while the floral print scarf was chosen to resemble Natalie Portman's iconic look for the Miss Dior campaign, as Aamina will show you on the next slide. And also kind of mirror the overall floral aesthetic of the entire campaign. And finally, the Chanel lipstick was chosen to nudge participants towards high-end beauty items, such as a Dior perfume. But again, we had to be very careful not to be too obvious so as not to awake persuasion resistance. So we really made it our mission to be as subtle as possible. But there was another benefit towards selecting this sort of format. Having Regina's favorite product listed in the format that they were also was an opportunity to make use of the anchoring heuristic. So all 3 items that we chose were strategically priced under £100, through which we hope to eliminate products whose prices deviated significantly later in the shop. And by pricing these 3 items at £39, £49, and £79 respectively, they also provided the perfect reference prices for our perfume, which we sold at £59. So it's right in the middle of these prices and also ends in a 9, which is, kind of what the anchoring heuristic hints at, that this would make it easier for them to select our perfume. But that's all in terms of the blog. Without further ado, let me hand over to Aamina, who'll take you through the next stage of the experiment.
Thank you so much, Jacob. So next, our participants were instructed to complete a social media task where they were shown a series of images and they had to navigate through them. Our main aim with the social media task was to prime users into really focusing on their sense of smell, so that once they entered our shop, they would be kind of subconsciously looking more at the scented products, including our perfume. So we used images of lavender, apple blossoms, as well as a cinnamon latte. And these were added to draw parallels to the perfume, which embodies floral design in both its product description and its actual design. And we also decided to depict images of luxury fashion blogger Chiara Ferragni, as you can see on the bottom left, and Natalie Portman, who's Dior's brand ambassador on the right. So Portman's picture is actually taken from the Miss Dior campaign. And we wanted to make sure the image was unbranded, but we still hoped to activate some associative networks surrounding this perfume. And then using the image of Ferragni, both primed the users into thinking of luxury beauty as she's a luxury blogger. And it also allowed us to subtly incorporate a Dior product being her bag, but without, once again, putting our perfume. And yeah, we wanted to further activate associative networks surrounding Dior. And we also felt that Ferragni's endorsement of the brand additionally provided social proof and authority, which testifies to the value of the brand overall. And next, Philipp will show you what we did in our actual shop.
Thank you, Aamina. Finally, our participants arrived at the online shop, where the layout, the labels, descriptions, and other elements collectively nudged them towards the perfume. The beauty section was set as a default landing page to capitalize on individuals' inertia and to minimize the effort required to reach the desired product. Our priming towards floral fragrances continued as we rebranded the site's banner and adapted its general color scheme to match the feminine and sophisticated personality of the Miss Dior product. Here we drew on the psychology of color to increase purchase intentions. This redesign's theme is depicted in the top right image. And as you can see, we used flowers and a pastel pink color theme. Various labels and discounts were also used to nudge visitors towards the fragrance and away from other products. For example, the Selling Fast label strengthened social proof and created a sense of scarcity, while the Vogue Favorite label enhanced source credibility, generating positive perceptions regarding the quality and the value of the fragrance. On the other hand, the clearance label paired with a discount sought to generate the opposite effect and decreased product desirability. Other labels strive to attain a similar effect. For example, the Men's Health endorsed and Great for Mature Skin labels were aimed at generating a mismatch between Sophie's target market and that of competing products. These labels can be seen on the other image. Despite the above efforts, we knew that there was still an inherent risk that participants would opt for an alternative product in the beauty category. For example, Michael Kors's Gorgeous perfume, which is depicted on the slide. Therefore, as a final element, we implemented a pop-up prompting users with a potential swap. Here, the salience of Miss Dior's environmental benefit was increased. In addition, this also allowed for direct comparisons, making the fragrance stand out more, as explained by the distinction bias. But how did all of our above efforts influence consumer choice? Sofia will now explore the quantifiable impact of our interventions.
Thank you, guys. So now that everyone can understand a bit better how the shop actually worked and how the experiment was framed, the most exciting part, at least to me, was looking at the results and the day that Joe announced that all of our groups had the results ready. So indeed, what we saw was that our efforts produced amazing results. And if this was a real life scenario, imagine what this could have been. So for example, comparing our shop, which had all these nudges, to the control shop, we achieved 3 times basket additions of the Miss Dior. So in a real life environment, this would have been amazing if you could increase your basket additions by 3 times. So, and even more importantly, the actual purchases went from 7 out of 38 participants to 21 out of 41, which is more or less a 1/3 increase in purchases. And once again, this is an amazing thing to see, and it was really incredible for us to see that our nudges actually produced quantifiable effects. So as Philipp just mentioned, there was always the risk that people would choose this other perfume, the Gorgeous, as you can see here, Eau de Parfum. So it's great for us that although we were really scared that we had applied all these nudges, pointing people towards scent and luxury, but still we achieved 0 purchases of this Gorgeous perfume through tactics such as applying the clearance label or the eco swap. And this is really amazing because arguably our biggest competitor in the shop was actually the least purchased alongside other items, of course, but 0 purchases of it. So yeah, this is really, really great that despite our efforts towards scent, we actually managed to nudge people not just towards our product, but away from our competitors, which is just everything that we need.
So just to round off our presentation, I'm sure myself and my teammates can speak on behalf of them. This was a truly invaluable experience. Not only were we able to apply theoretical classroom learning to the real world of digital marketing, but we were also able to do this in an industry relevant manner, where we were able to utilize Gorilla's functions to get a taste of what really goes on a digital marketing platform. So I'm sure we definitely acquired some transferable skills that we can apply to other such similar platforms, such as Shopify or Wix. I'm sure some of you know them. This collaboration was also practical and super relevant to our degree. As Gillian mentioned, it's an exciting talking point to bring up in interviews, and it's a real practical demonstration of, our fundamental understanding of the digital marketing industry. So finally, it was a refreshingly different additional component to any module we've ever taken at King's over the past 3 years. And I think it's because of this uniqueness, we were really eager to get involved, and it was because of this that we were able to take so much more away from the experience and the module itself. It's incredibly exciting, and I'm sure we'll all reflect on our uni years and remember this exciting module. So that's all from us. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, we're happy to take them, whether that be about, anything that we talked about in our experiment, or, anything about the experience itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Team Alpha. You were absolutely incredible. And I'm sure I speak for everybody in the audience. If you were my third year students, I would be absolutely gobsmacked at the quality of the research that you've done today. People in the room, this. If you can, write a message in the chat to say what you thought of the research that Team Alpha have done. I thought what they did was extraordinary, how they have pulled together all these different psychological theories and implemented them within this shopping experience to test these behavioral nudges towards consumers. Gareth, can you turn your camera on too? I am woefully unqualified to ask Team Alpha any questions at this point because I'm not a consumer psychologist. So Gareth, I'm going to turn it over to you to ask the first questions to the team, because this is your bread and butter and your area of expertise.
So first thing, with so many different sort of interventions available, how did you narrow it down, or how did you prioritize which ones you were going to start with?
So I think a good way to start any research project is you have to see what's out there. So we really started by looking at, the theories that we discussed in class with Gillian, doing a lot of literature research, and just really kind of sieving through everything that we'd seen. But really, it was a very, creative process amongst us. So we really started by, seeing which product do we want to nudge consumers towards. And then we really started applying what we thought was relevant. So for example, we started, looking at, should we kind of prime users? What kind of experimental things can we do? So when we started settling on, we want to do a blog, then we want to do a social media task, it really all went from there. And we ended up kind of incorporating, Cialdini's principles of persuasion, also color theory, and, things like white space. So it was really a very organic process. We didn't go in, knowing these are the things we want to incorporate, but it was really a step-by-step sequential process. And as you might have noticed, all our nudges kind of linked or built up on each other. So it was really a very sequential process.
And with testing so many different ideas at the same time, which is great because that's how things work in the real world outside of academia. If you had to try and work out how you could identify which ones had the greatest effect, how would you sort of try and do that as a next step? So if you were generalizing it to another products, you could actually just focus on what was effective.
Yeah, I think that's something that we also discussed, which was quite tricky about the project. So again, like our nudges were very interlinked, so they really built on one another. So it's kind of hard to see which one was it that was the most effective. But I think if we were to kind of redo this, knowing that it was effective in the end, we would kind of like isolate certain variables and kind of try to, maybe just do a blog and then do the control shop, or just do the social media task, or, leave the two experiments away, leave that whole section away and just try our nudges on the website itself. So really the next step would be isolating each other, certain variables. But I think what made it so unique is that they built kind of on top of each other. And I think that was really interesting to see that they, kind of the way that they interacted produced these results.
No, I think it's really cool. And it's really nice to see it being tested, not just saying, oh, how much does a price change affect you? You've got it in a shop, and you can actually see what really happens, because as we all know, the way people behave in a retail setting is completely different to how people think or how they claim they act.
So we've only got one of the student groups here today. Julian had a class of 100 students, so there were about 20 groups of 5 students. Team Alpha nudged people towards Miss Dior and got this 3x increase in sales. There was another team that nudged people towards Dior as well, and they did reasonably well. And then there were lots of other teams that picked different products, and we saw nudges towards those as well. So we know that this wasn't just that luck, and if we were structuring it differently, again, we could do it so that there's a cluster of students all nudging towards Dior, and they all try different elements. So one group could just do the blog, and one group could just do this, and another group to do all bits together, so that we have a bit more of that. Where does the influence come from? Which bits of the funnel of all of the nudges were having the most influence? With that, I think we're getting towards the end of the session. We do have some time for some more questions. Hang on a minute. I'm going to put up the Q&A. Balachanda asks, is it hard to control many factors while applying nudges in the wild? However, what kind of factors did you control? For example, did you keep your social media interactions the same?
So kind of to answer the second part of your question in terms of the social media task. So it wasn't a real social media feed, kind of, it was just, you had kind of a page of images where the user kind of navigated back and forward. And the only thing that they could do is, press a like button or not. But really, this didn't really matter to the outcome, because the only thing that mattered to us is that they were being exposed to these images in the first place. So it wasn't kind of like a real social media feed as you would imagine it, while scrolling through Instagram. It was really just an opportunity for us to prime users and to get them to do this sort of task before they enter our shop. Yeah, so I hope that answers part of your question.
Yeah, I think it definitely does. But Gareth, can you speak to how do shops work out all of their nudges in the wild? How do they make sure that nudges don't cancel each other out?
So typically when we work with some of the larger brands that have stores, they may have 50 different versions of their website live at any one time. So we're taking A/B testing to the next level. So when I was working with, let's say, a travel retailer, I think we had about 70 different versions of the website live. And each time we just made one small tweak on it, see how it performed. The next day, right, let's change that one and make another change. So we are running so many different experiments simultaneously. And then once we think we know what works, well, what happens when we combine 2 different nudges or 2 different interventions together? Because sometimes 2 different interventions may work really well. When you combine them together, you get a negative reaction. So it's starting to work out what happens when you start pulling multiple ones together, because things don't always work the way you're expecting them to.